King Tutankhamun's golden mask is one of history's most recognized faces, yet the true story of how his body was transformed for eternity remains shrouded in mystery. What were the real secrets behind the ancient Egyptian practice of mummification that allowed bodies to survive for thousands of years? This journey goes far beyond simple linen wraps, revealing a complex process rooted in profound spiritual beliefs and startling scientific precision. By the end, you will understand the extraordinary, step-by-step ritual that turned a corpse into an eternal being. We will uncover why the brain was discarded as useless while the heart was treated as sacred, and how a special salt from the desert could preserve human tissue for millennia. What do you believe was the most powerful force driving the ancient Egyptians to achieve such a feat? For the ancient Egyptians, death was not an end but a perilous transition. The preservation of the body was a sacred act, a crucial defense against a far more terrifying fate known as the second death. This was a complete and final annihilation, where all parts of a person would cease to exist forever. To prevent this, they believed a person was made of several interconnected parts, each needing to be maintained for eternal life. The most vital of these was the ka, a kind of life force or spiritual double that was born with you. Think of the ka as a person's essential energy, a spirit that required a physical anchor in this world. After death, the ka continued to need sustenance, which is why food and drink were left in tombs. But it also needed a home, a place to return to, which is why the preserved body was so absolutely essential. Without a physical form to recognize and inhabit, the ka would be lost, wandering and starving for eternity. Then there was the ba, often shown as a bird with a human head. This was your personality, your unique character, everything that made you who you were. The ba could leave the tomb during the day, flying out to travel the world, but it had to return to the body each night to reunite with the ka. This nightly reunion was critical for the survival of the whole person. When the ka and ba successfully joined, they formed the Ak, the glorious, transformed spirit that could live on among the stars and gods. This entire beautiful, complex process hinged on one thing: the continued existence of a recognizable physical body. Mummification, then, was not merely a scientific exercise in preventing decay. It was a spiritual ritual of the highest importance, a necessary procedure to create an eternal vessel. The wrappings, the amulets, the canopic jars, every single step was designed to protect and prepare the body for its eternal role. Without this careful, deliberate transformation, the journey to the afterlife was impossible and the soul faced utter oblivion. Once the spiritual need for preservation was understood, the physical work began in a space both sacred and starkly practical. This was the Per-Nefer, a name meaning the house of beauty, though its reality was far from gentle. Imagine a dedicated workshop, a place of purification set deliberately apart from the bustling city. Here, the body was taken to a special slab, often made from a single block of solid stone. The first act was one of profound symbolism, a ritual washing with water hauled directly from the Nile River. This was not merely for physical cleanliness, it was a reenactment of the annual Nile flood, which brought life to the desert, and thus it symbolized rebirth and renewal for the deceased. The priests performing this sacred duty were not just mortals going about a job, they were acting as living representatives of the gods. To signify this, they wore masks depicting the jackal-headed deity Anubis, the god of mummification and the afterlife. Their tools were not ordinary either. Each knife and instrument was consecrated for this sole purpose, handled with a reverence that transformed a medical procedure into a holy rite. The atmosphere in this workshop was a strange mix of the spiritual and the visceral, filled with the scent of incense and ritual oils meant to purify the air, masking the stark realities of the task at hand. This careful, respectful beginning was absolutely crucial, for it set the stage for the most dramatic and invasive step of the entire process, one that required a breathtaking understanding of human anatomy and a startlingly pragmatic approach to the human form. The most invasive procedure began with a slender, hooked rod made of bronze. An embalming priest would carefully guide this instrument up through the deceased's nostril, a delicate passage leading directly to the cranial cavity. With a skilled and practiced motion, the hook would be used to break through the thin bone of the ethmoid, entering the space that held the brain. The objective was not to remove the brain in one piece, but to literally liquefy it. The priest would gently but persistently manipulate the hook, swirling it to break down the delicate tissue into a semi-liquid state. Once sufficiently liquefied, the brain would be drained out by tilting the head, often flowing back down the nasal passage to be discarded entirely. This method seems shockingly crude to us now, but it achieved its goal with minimal external disfigurement, preserving the overall shape of the head and face. For the ancient Egyptians, this act was not one of disrespect but of profound theological significance. They believed the brain was essentially useless, a mere filler for the skull with no role in a person's eternal existence. All thought, feeling, and identity were believed to reside in a different organ entirely. This stands in absolute contrast to the extraordinary care given to the human heart. While the brain was unceremoniously discarded, the heart was treated as the single most important part of the body. It was considered the seat of the soul, the source of a person's intellect, memory, and moral character. The heart would be meticulously left inside the chest cavity, or in later periods carefully removed, ritually cleansed, and then placed back inside the body. Why such a stark difference in treatment between two vital organs? The answer lies in the final, divine judgment awaiting the soul, a trial where the heart itself would literally speak for the deceased. With the brain removed and discarded, the focus shifted to the torso, where the next act was both a medical marvel and a deeply spiritual violation. A single, precise incision was made on the left side of the abdomen, just long enough to allow the embalmer's hands to reach inside. This was not a random cut, but a carefully calculated opening designed to minimize visible damage while providing access to the vital organs that needed to be removed. The liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines were all meticulously extracted through this narrow window. These organs were considered important enough to save, but too prone to decay to leave inside the body cavity. Yet this necessary act of cutting the flesh was also a profound sin, a desecration of the sacred human form. What happened next was a piece of pure ritual theater, a drama designed to address this spiritual conflict. The priest who performed the actual cutting, the man who wielded the knife, immediately became a symbol of this transgression. As soon as his work was done, he would drop his blade and flee from the workshop. The other priests present would pick up stones and chase him, shouting curses and hurling the rocks in a symbolic act of punishment and rejection. This dramatic flight was not a sign of incompetence or real anger. It was a carefully staged performance meant to purify the entire procedure. By driving away the cutter, the community symbolically expelled the act of violence itself, ensuring that the sin of harming the body did not taint the sacred goal of eternal preservation. The necessary evil was committed, and then its perpetrator was ritually banished, leaving the body cleansed and ready for its transformation. With the organs carefully removed, their preservation began immediately. Each one, the lungs, the liver, the stomach, and the intestines, was individually treated. They were washed and then packed inside and out with the same remarkable substance used on the body itself, natron salt. This special salt, harvested from the beds of dried-up desert lakes, was the true miracle worker of mummification. It acted like a powerful, natural desiccant, pulling every last drop of moisture from the soft tissues, leaving them shriveled, dry, and completely resistant to decay. This was not a quick process. It took many weeks for the natron to do its work thoroughly. Once the organs were fully dried and hardened, they were ready for their own special form of eternal safekeeping. Each organ was assigned its own dedicated guardian and its own beautiful container, a canopic jar. These were not mere storage pots, they were sacred vessels, a complete set of 4 that formed a crucial part of the tomb's equipment. The 4 jars were almost always fashioned from a single block of beautiful stone like alabaster, or crafted from fine pottery and covered in a rich, glossy glaze. The stopper of each jar was carved into the shape of a human or animal head, representing one of the 4 sons of Horus, a group of minor deities whose sole responsibility was to protect these specific internal parts of the deceased. Seti, with his human head, was the guardian of the liver. He was often associated with the goddess Isis for extra protection. Hapi, who had the head of a baboon, watched over the lungs. Duamutef, with his jackal head, was the protector of the stomach, and Kebesenuf, who bore the head of a falcon, was entrusted with the safety of the intestines. This system was a masterpiece of ancient Egyptian thought, blending deep spiritual belief with a highly organized, practical approach. Every single part of the person had to be preserved, and every part required a divine protector to ensure its survival for the journey ahead. The body was now empty of its organs, but the most transformative stage of the entire ritual was just about to begin. Yet one organ was treated with absolute reverence, never to be removed. The heart remained securely in its place within the chest, the one part of the inner body considered far too sacred to ever be discarded. While the brain was seen as worthless and the other organs were stored in jars, the heart was believed to be the very core of a person's being. It was not merely a pump for blood, but the physical vessel for the soul itself, the source of all intelligence, emotion, and memory. Your entire moral compass, your character, and your life's experiences were thought to reside within your heart. This profound belief culminated in the most critical moment of the afterlife, the final judgment. The Egyptians envisioned a grand hall where the deceased would stand before the god Osiris and a council of deities. The central act of this divine trial was the weighing of the heart. The person's heart was placed on one side of a massive, golden scale, perfectly balanced against a single feather on the other side. This was no ordinary feather. It was the feather of Maat, representing truth, justice, and the fundamental order of the universe. If the heart was heavy with the weight of misdeeds, burdened by lies, greed, or violence, the scale would tip downward. A monstrous creature, part lion and part hippopotamus, waited nearby, ready to devour the heavy heart, condemning the soul to oblivion. But if the heart was as light as the feather, pure and free from sin, the scale would balance perfectly. This was the ultimate sign of a virtuous life, granting the soul permission to enter the paradise of the field of reeds. The stakes of this single moment were so high that the Egyptians developed a powerful magical safeguard. They crafted special amulets known as heart scarabs, carved from dark green stone and inscribed with a spell from the Book of the Dead. This scarab was placed over the heart within the mummy's wrappings, a magical piece of insurance intended to keep the heart from speaking out against its owner during the judgment. It was a plea to the heart itself, a charm to silence any potential confession of wrongdoing and ensure it would not betray its owner at the final, fateful moment. The entire mummification process, therefore, was a physical preparation for this spiritual trial, ensuring the heart was preserved and protected for its day of divine reckoning. The body, now empty of its organs, was ready for its most transformative encounter, a meeting with the very substance of the desert itself. This was natron salt, a brilliant white mixture harvested from the dry lake beds of a place called Wadi Natron. Do not think of this as simple table salt. It was a powerful, natural compound of sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, salt, and sodium sulfate. Embalmers would pack the entire body cavity with linen bags stuffed full of this dry salt, and then they would completely cover the corpse from head to toe in a massive mound of natron crystals. The body was left on a slanted embalming table, positioned so that any liquids draining from the tissues could flow away easily. This was not a process of hours or days, but a long, silent vigil lasting 40 full days. Why 40 days? This number held deep symbolic meaning, representing the time the star Sirius, linked to the goddess Isis, vanished from the sky before its reappearance signaled the Nile's life-giving flood. For 40 days and nights, the natron worked its magic. It acted as a phenomenal desiccant, pulling every single molecule of moisture from the skin, muscles, and remaining tissues. It killed the bacteria that caused decay and chemically saponified the body's fats, essentially turning them into a kind of soap that could be washed away. Imagine the effect of leaving a fresh grape in the sun for weeks, watching it shrivel and harden into a raisin. The human body underwent a similar, though far more controlled, transformation. After this period, the embalmers would return to a body that was dramatically changed. It was no longer soft and pliable, but shrunken, hardened, and leathery to the touch. The skin was stretched taut over the bones, dark and deeply tanned from the chemical reaction. It was a stark, skeletal version of the person who had died, but it was now a perfectly preserved shell, free from the agents of decay. The body had successfully cheated nature, stabilized for eternity. With the flesh now permanently desiccated, the meticulous work of restoring a lifelike appearance could finally begin. After 40 days in the stark dryness of the salt, the body was brittle and desiccated, a hollowed shell ready for its spiritual restoration. The priests carefully removed the body from its natron bed, brushing away the last white crystals. What followed was a complete reversal of the harsh desiccation process, a ritual known as the anointing ceremony. The body was gently washed with water, not just for cleanliness, but to symbolically wash away all remnants of the desert's aridity. Then came the precious oils and resins, the most expensive and fragrant substances in the ancient world. These were not mere perfumes, they were sacred agents of life itself. The priests would anoint the body from head to toe with rich, aromatic oils like cedar and juniper. They used thick, dark resins such as myrrh and frankincense, substances so valuable they were worth their weight in gold. Palm wine was also used, its sweet, fermented scent mingling with the resins to create a powerful, holy aroma. This was not simply about making the mummy smell pleasant. Each drop of oil and every dab of resin was a symbolic act of profound importance. The desert salts had taken all moisture away to prevent decay, but this ritual was about giving a different kind of moisture back, a spiritual vitality. They were anointing the body to restore its sanctity and its connection to the living, fluid world. The skin, once leathery and stiff, was now made supple and fragrant with these holy unguents, transforming the corpse into a vessel fit for the soul's return. This was the final preparation of the physical form, a reconsecration that turned a preserved body into a sacred icon, ready for its final, most intricate wrapping. Yet the body that emerged from the salts was a shrunken, hollow version of its former self. The skin clung tightly to the bones, the cheeks were sunken, and the form was gaunt and skeletal. This posed a serious spiritual problem, for how could the Ka, the life force, recognize and return to a body that looked nothing like the person it once knew? The solution was a practice that blends ancient artistry with deep necessity, the process of stuffing and shaping. The embalmers became sculptors, working to restore the body's familiar contours. They carefully packed the empty chest and abdominal cavities with a variety of clean, dry materials. Sawdust, bundles of fine linen, and even precious spices like myrrh were used as internal padding. But one of the most surprising materials was the humble onion. Slices of onion were sometimes placed just beneath the skin, particularly in the areas of the eyes, cheeks, and abdomen. The onion's natural roundness and firm texture helped to push the skin outward, recreating the plump, lifelike fullness of a living person. This was not a random choice, as the onion was also a symbol of eternal life and was known for its pungent, life-affirming scent, which may have been thought to aid in revivification. In some cases, false eyes made of stone or painted onion slices were inserted into the empty eye sockets, completing the face with a startlingly realistic gaze. Every action was deliberate, every material chosen not just for its physical properties but for its symbolic power. The goal was to create a perfected, ideal version of the deceased, a vessel that was not merely preserved but restored and ready for the soul's eternal return. With the body's form now perfected, the final and most protective stage of the ritual could commence. The transformation of the body was now complete, but it remained vulnerable without its final, sacred armor. The wrapping ceremony began, a meticulous multi-day ritual where priests did not simply dress a corpse, they performed a live magic show for the deceased. As they worked, they chanted spells and incantations directly from the Book of the Dead, their voices filling the workshop with ancient words of power meant to activate the protection woven into every fold of linen. This was not a rushed process. It started at the very extremities of the body, with each individual finger and toe being wrapped on its own. Every digit was carefully isolated within its own tiny linen sheath, preserving its unique identity and preventing the limbs from fusing together in the afterlife. Think of the care you would take to individually wrap the most delicate and intricate parts of a precious object before placing it into a box for a long journey. That was the level of reverence and precision applied here. Only after every finger and toe was individually protected did the priests move to the hands and feet, binding them as whole units. Then they worked their way up, wrapping the arms and the legs separately before finally addressing the torso and head. This limb-by-limb, section-by-section approach was a deliberate act of spiritual assembly. It ensured that every single part of the person was magically sealed and fortified, creating a complete and inviolable vessel ready for the soul's eternal journey. But these linen wrappings were far more than just a protective shell. They were a hidden gallery of sacred power. As the priests wound the bandages, they carefully placed dozens of magical amulets between the layers, creating a complete suit of spiritual armor for the soul's perilous journey. Each charm was selected for a specific purpose, and its placement was dictated by ancient spells. One of the most vital was the Jed Pillar amulet, a symbol that looks like a stylized tree with 4 crossbars. This charm represented stability and the enduring backbone of the god Osiris himself. It was always placed against the mummy's spine, a magical act intended to ensure the deceased would stand strong, firm, and resurrected in the afterlife, just as Osiris had been. Another crucial amulet was the Tayet, often called the Knot of Isis or the Blood of Isis. This looped cross shape was a potent symbol of protection, linked directly to the powerful magic of the goddess Isis. It was typically placed near the throat or chest, invoking the goddess's fierce protection to safeguard the body from any harm or evil forces it might encounter. Then there was the Eye of Horus, perhaps the most famous symbol of all. This was the restored eye of the falcon god Horus, which was torn apart and then magically made whole again. The amulet represented healing, wholeness, and physical integrity. By placing it on the body, the priests were performing a magical act of restoration, ensuring that all the senses and parts of the person would be complete and functional in the next world. And of course, we return to the heart scarab, the final piece of magical insurance. This amulet was not just a representation, it was a functional object inscribed with a direct plea from chapter 30 of the Book of the Dead. The spell carved on its base was a desperate request. It begged the heart not to betray its owner during the final weighing of the heart ceremony. It was a charm of silence and obedience, placed directly over the heart to ensure it would remain pure and not testify against the deceased. These were not mere decorations, they were active magical devices, each one a critical piece of a divine puzzle, woven into the very fabric of the mummy to ensure nothing, not even the soul's own heart, could stand in the way of eternal life. The final act of preservation involved a substance that flowed like dark honey and smelled of sanctity. Liquid resin, heated until it was thin and pourable, was the ultimate sealant. Priests would carefully pour this sticky, aromatic pitch over the fully wrapped body, sometimes even between the final layers of linen. As it cascaded down the bandages, it soaked deep into the fabric, coating every thread. This was not a mere symbolic gesture, it was a brilliant scientific application. The resin acted as a powerful antibacterial and waterproof barrier, creating a sealed environment that no microbe or moisture could penetrate. It effectively glued the linen wrappings into a single, solid shell around the body, locking out the air and elements that cause decay. In some cases, the chemical reaction of the resin over centuries, particularly within the warm, dry confines of a tomb, caused a phenomenon known as carbonization. The resin essentially turned into a form of charcoal, further hardening the mummy's casing into a blackened, rock-like state. While this sometimes made modern unwrapping difficult, it was this very transformation that saved countless mummies from completely disintegrating. The resin was the final, perfect lock on a timeless vault, ensuring the sacred vessel within would remain intact, waiting for the soul it was built to house. Even the most sacred wrappings needed one final layer, a great outer shroud that bound the entire form into a single, cohesive whole. This large linen sheet was drawn taut over the fully wrapped and amulet-laden body, serving as the ultimate canvas. Upon this pristine surface, artists would often paint a magnificent image of the god Osiris, the lord of the afterlife, his green skin symbolizing rebirth and his crossed arms holding the crook and flail of kingship. By wrapping the deceased in the image of the resurrected god, the priests were performing a final, powerful act of magic, identifying the dead with Osiris himself to guarantee their own rebirth. But the most important object was yet to come. The final, breathtaking piece of the ritual was the portrait mask. For a pharaoh like Tutankhamun, this was a masterpiece of solid gold and precious gems, an idealized, eternal face. For ordinary Egyptians, it was crafted from cartonnage, a versatile and sturdy material made from layers of linen and plaster that could be molded and painted with stunning detail. This mask was far more than a beautiful effigy, it was a crucial piece of spiritual technology. Its primary function was to act as a permanent, indestructible substitute for the head and face of the deceased. The ancient Egyptians held a very practical fear. What if, through some accident or the slow passage of centuries, the actual mummified head was damaged? How would the wandering Ba spirit recognize its body to reunite with it each night? The portrait mask solved this problem perfectly. It provided a guaranteed, flawless face that the spirit would always know, a face that never aged or decayed. Furthermore, the mask was often inscribed with spells from the Book of the Dead around the mouth and eyes. These incantations were designed to magically open the senses in the next world. They granted the deceased the ability to breathe the air of paradise, to speak the words of power needed to navigate the underworld, and to see the glorious sight of the gods. The mask ensured the soul could eat and drink the spiritual offerings left in the tomb. It was, in essence, a perfect and eternal identity, a guaranteed face for eternity that secured all the functions of life in the world to come. This perfected vessel, sealed within its golden mask, was still not considered safe enough for eternity. The ancient Egyptians believed in layers of security, both physical and magical, creating a series of nested containers that functioned like a set of Russian dolls designed for the afterlife. The first and most intimate of these containers was the inner coffin itself. This was not a simple box, but a masterpiece of artistry crafted to perfectly hug the contours of the mummified body. Typically made of wood and shaped in the human form, this coffin was a riot of color and sacred text. Its entire surface, inside and out, was covered in a brilliant painted tableau. Vivid images of gods and goddesses stood guard, their eyes watchful. Hieroglyphic spells from the Book of the Dead snaked around the form, a continuous script of magic intended to activate the moment the coffin was sealed. The interior was just as important, often painted with a stunning image of the sky goddess Nut. Her star-studded body arched protectively over the space where the deceased would lie. To be placed inside this coffin was to be enveloped in a continuous prayer, a sacred text that would speak on your behalf forever. But this beautiful wooden shell was just the first layer. It was then placed carefully inside a far larger and more formidable container known as the sarcophagus. This outer shell was a monumental object, usually carved from a single, massive block of stone like limestone or granite. The sheer weight and durability of the stone provided an undeniable physical defense against tomb robbers and the slow crush of time, but its purpose was also profoundly spiritual. Many sarcophagi were also anthropoid or human-shaped, mirroring the form within. The lid was frequently carved with the serene, idealized face of the deceased, their arms crossed over their chest in the pose of the god Osiris. The exterior surfaces were carved with even more potent magical scenes, the stone itself serving as a permanent billboard of divine protection. This complex hierarchy was a perfect expression of Egyptian thought. The wooden coffin was the personal, magical shield, alive with active spells. The stone sarcophagus was the eternal, physical fortress, an immovable mountain of protection. Together, they created a sacred geography of safety, a guaranteed sanctuary where the soul could rest, secure from all the chaos of the mortal world and the perils of the underworld until the moment of its glorious awakening. Even sealed within its nested coffins, the mummy was not yet considered truly alive in the next world. It was a perfect vessel, but one that remained dormant, its senses sealed away. The final, crucial act that bridged the gap between preservation and true resurrection was a ritual known as the opening of the mouth. This powerful ceremony was always performed at the entrance to the tomb, the threshold between the world of the living and the eternal home of the dead. It was here that a special kind of priest, known as a sem-priest, would approach the upright mummy, which was often propped against the wall of the tomb or held by another priest. The central tool of this magic was a strange and ancient object, a carved adze made from a dark, mysterious meteoritic iron. This was no ordinary metal. It was a substance that had fallen from the heavens, imbued with the power of the stars. The priest would raise this sacred adze and gently touch it to the mouth, the eyes, the ears, and the nose of the mummy's portrait mask or the face painted on the outer coffin. Each touch was accompanied by specific, potent spells chanted from the Book of the Dead. These were not gentle blessings, they were commands of activation. The touch of the celestial iron on the mouth was a command to open, to breathe, to speak the words of power needed to navigate the underworld and to consume the spiritual essence of the food offerings left in the tomb. The touch on the eyes was an order to see, to behold the glorious light of the gods and the beauty of the field of reeds. The touch on the ears granted the ability to hear the divine pronouncements of Osiris and the pleas of loved ones left behind. And the touch on the nose restored the sense of smell, allowing the soul to breathe in the sacred incense and the sweet air of paradise. Think of this not as a simple ritual, but as the ancient Egyptian equivalent of flipping a master switch. The mummy was a complex machine, perfectly constructed and now fully fueled, but it remained in standby mode. The opening of the mouth ceremony was the act of pressing the power button, sending a jolt of divine magic through the system to boot up all of its essential functions. Without this final, vital spark of ritual, the entire meticulous process of mummification would have been for nothing. The body could be preserved for 10,000 years, but it would be a silent, blind, and senseless prison for the soul. This ceremony completed the great work, transforming a silent effigy into a living, breathing, and fully aware eternal being, ready to take its first steps into the afterlife. With the mummy fully activated and its senses restored, the soul now needed a place to live for eternity. The tomb was far more than a burial chamber. It was a fully stocked eternal home, designed to provide for every possible need of the Ka in the afterlife. Upon entering, you would not find a barren crypt, but a residence brimming with the comforts of life. Shelves and storage rooms were packed with provisions. Jars of grain, dates, and honey stood ready to be magically consumed. Baskets held loaves of real bread, and amphorae were sealed with fine wines and beer. But what would happen when this physical food eventually decayed? This is where the magic truly began. The walls of the tomb were covered in elaborate paintings and carvings depicting endless meals, vast feasts, and overflowing granaries. These images were not mere decoration, they were magical insurance policies. Spells inscribed nearby would activate these scenes, transforming the painted bounty into a perpetual spiritual food source that would never run out. The Ka could feast forever on the essence of these depicted meals. The tomb was also furnished with the actual belongings of the deceased: chairs, beds, chests of clothing, and jewelry, all items the person had known and used in life. These familiar objects provided a profound comfort and a tangible anchor for the returning spirit, making the tomb a recognizable and welcoming home. Yet one of the most ingenious provisions was the army of servant statues known as shabtis. These were small, mummiform figures, often carved from wood or faience, and they came with their own tiny tools, hoes, and baskets. A single person could be buried with hundreds of them. Each shabti was inscribed with a specific spell from the Book of the Dead, a command that gave it life. The spell essentially said, "If I am called upon to do any work in the afterlife, such as tilling the fields or clearing irrigation canals, you there, shabti, answer for me. You say, I will do it, I am here." This magical workforce ensured that the deceased could enjoy an eternity of leisure in the field of reeds, never having to perform manual labor again. Every detail, from a single loaf of bread to a regiment of miniature servants, was a carefully considered element in a grand design for eternal comfort, turning a stone chamber into a vibrant, functioning home for an immortal spirit. The story of mummification is a journey spanning thousands of years, beginning not in grand workshops but in the simple, dry sands of the desert. Long before the first pyramids pierced the horizon, the earliest Egyptians were buried in shallow pits dug directly into the scorching earth. They were laid to rest in a fetal position, wrapped in animal skins or simple reed mats, with a few personal possessions for the journey ahead. There was no artificial preservation, no removal of organs, no sacred rituals. Yet something remarkable happened. The hot, arid sand acted like a vast natural desiccant, sucking the moisture from the body with an efficiency that rivaled any human technique. The result was a perfect natural mummy, preserved by the desert itself with skin and hair intact. These early burials were a beautiful accident of the environment, a chance discovery that planted a crucial seed in the Egyptian mind. They saw with their own eyes that the body could indeed defy decay. This physical proof ignited a spiritual revolution, forging a direct link between a preserved body and the hope for an eternal existence. As Egyptian society coalesced into a kingdom with pharaohs and grand ambitions, burial practices evolved dramatically. The elite began constructing massive mud brick tombs called mastabas, wanting monuments that reflected their power in death. But this architectural leap created an unforeseen problem. By placing the body deep within a sealed, insulated structure, they had removed it from the very element that had preserved it so perfectly, the dehydrating sand. Inside these sturdy tombs, shielded from the desert's breath, the bodies succumbed to decay. The nobility were faced with a devastating irony. Their grand tombs, designed for eternity, were ensuring the destruction of the one thing they needed to survive. This crisis forced a period of intense experimentation during the Old Kingdom. Embalmers began to try anything that might halt the rot. They experimented with wrapping bodies in resin-soaked linen, creating a hard, shell-like casing. They attempted to preserve the flesh with various oils and unguents. The process was crude and often unsuccessful, but it was a necessary, stumbling first step toward the sophisticated techniques that would follow. The goal was no longer to rely on nature's whim, but to master the art of preservation through human ingenuity and ritual. True mastery arrived during the New Kingdom, a golden age where the art of mummification reached its breathtaking peak. This was the era of pharaohs like Tutankhamun and Ramses the Great, and their mummies are testaments to a perfected science. The process became a highly standardized 70-day ritual performed by guilds of specialized priests. The complex steps we have explored, the brain removal, the organ preservation in canopic jars, the 40-day natron treatment, were all refined to an exacting degree. The wrapping became an elaborate, multi-layered ceremony, and the tomb assemblages grew to include everything from golden masks to fleets of shabti servants. This was mummification as a high art form, a seamless fusion of profound spiritual belief and startling anatomical knowledge. The goal was no longer just to prevent decay, but to create a perfect, idealized, and eternal version of the deceased, a divine vessel capable of housing the soul forever. By the late period and into the Greco-Roman era, the practice began to change in telling ways. The demand for mummification exploded, becoming accessible to nearly everyone who could afford even a basic version. This mass production led to a noticeable decline in quality. Embalmers sometimes took shortcuts, using cheaper materials like mud and sawdust to plump bodies, or even reusing old wrappings. In a fascinating shift, the carefully preserved organs were no longer always placed in individual canopic jars, but were often wrapped in packages and placed back inside the body cavity. The external canopic jars remained, but they were sometimes just for show, empty or containing meaningless bundles. Yet, even as the technical skill waned, the artistic expression on the outside flourished. The cartonnage cases and coffin portraits from this period are stunningly realistic, depicting the deceased with intricate detail, capturing their actual features and hairstyles. This tells us that the core belief never died. The hope for an eternal life remained as strong as ever, even as the methods for achieving it became more symbolic than scientific. The journey from a simple desert grave to a royal workshop and back to a common craft reveals not a story of failure, but one of adaptation, where the dream of eternity was reshaped by time, economics, and an unshakable faith in the world to come. The golden masks and stone sarcophagi tell only one side of the story. This meticulous 70-day ritual with its priests and sacred amulets was a luxury reserved for the elite, a royal road to the afterlife paved with immense wealth. For the vast majority of ancient Egyptians, the common farmers, artisans, and laborers, the journey to eternity was far more humble and starkly reflected the social divisions of the world they left behind. If you were poor, your mummification was a drastically simplified affair, often little more than a basic preservation to ensure your car would not be lost. Instead of a 70-day process in the Pernefer, your body might be treated with a simple, cost-effective method. The most common approach for those with modest means was to soak the body in a concentrated salt solution, a kind of brine bath. This still used the power of natron, but in a liquid form that was cheaper and required far less of the precious salt than the massive dry mounds used on nobility. The body would be submerged for a number of days, allowing the solution to draw out the moisture and halt decay. There were no specialized priests in jackal masks performing this duty, no ritual incantations, and certainly no removal of the brain or internal organs. The body was simply dried and then wrapped in whatever linen the family could afford. This was a functional preservation, a spiritual necessity stripped of its grandeur. The poorest of the poor faced the most direct and poignant fate of all. If a family could not afford any form of chemical treatment, they had one final, desperate option. They would place the body directly into the hot, dry desert sand, just as their ancestors had done thousands of years before. They relied solely on the natural desiccation of the environment to preserve their loved one, hoping the shifting sands would be kind. This was a return to the most ancient of traditions, a quiet plea to the desert itself to grant the gift of eternity. In death, as in life, your social standing dictated your experience. A pharaoh was transformed into a god wrapped in gold and magic. A commoner was merely dried and bundled, hoping their soul would find its way home. The desire for eternal life extended far beyond the human realm, creating an entire industry dedicated to the mummification of animals. This was not merely a quaint practice of burying a beloved family cat, though that certainly happened. The scale was truly staggering, with millions upon millions of animal mummies placed underground, forming vast subterranean cities of the sacred dead. These creatures served two distinct, powerful roles in the spiritual landscape. Some animals were indeed cherished companions, mummified and placed in tombs to accompany their owners into the afterlife. Inscriptions and tomb paintings show pets like dogs, cats, and monkeys living in the home, their names recorded and their presence dearly missed. To bury such a pet with its owner was an act of deep affection, ensuring the bond of companionship would continue forever in the field of reeds. But this personal sentiment was dwarfed by the sheer volume of animals mummified for a different, more public purpose. These were votive offerings, physical prayers made manifest. A pilgrim traveling to a major temple complex, like the one dedicated to the cat goddess Bastet at Bubastes, would not arrive empty-handed. They would purchase a pre-mummified cat from the temple priests. This was not an act of cruelty, but one of profound devotion. By offering the mummy of the goddess's sacred animal, the pilgrim was delivering a direct message to the deity, a permanent petition for health, favor, or thanks. The animal itself was seen as a living representation of the god, so its mummified body became a direct conduit for divine communication. Each carefully wrapped ibis was a plea to Thoth, the god of wisdom. Every linen-swathed crocodile was an offering to Sobek, the powerful lord of the Nile's fertility and its dangers. The scope of this industry was immense. Archaeologists have discovered catacombs stretching for miles, filled from floor to ceiling with stacked pots containing these sacred animal mummies. At Saqqara, there are underground galleries dedicated solely to the ibis, containing an estimated 4 million bird mummies. Another site held thousands upon thousands of mummified dogs and jackals offered to Anubis. There were even tombs for scarab beetles, mummified and placed in tiny, beautifully carved stone coffins. This was a society's entire faith made physical, a tangible economy of devotion where the hope of millions was wrapped in linen and entrusted to the gods for all eternity. The reality of the embalming workshop comes into focus not through grand treasures, but through the quiet, physical evidence left behind. No complete set of a priest's sacred tools has ever been discovered, likely because these instruments were considered ritually impure after their gruesome work and were either destroyed or buried separately. Yet, archaeology has pieced together a compelling picture from fragments and residues. At sites like Saqqara, we find the most direct artifacts, the embalming tables themselves. These are not mere slabs of stone, but carefully crafted installations, often made from a single block of limestone with carved channels and gutters to drain fluids away from the body during the process. Beside these tables, archaeologists have uncovered collections of large clay jars, some still containing the stains of the substances they once held. Residue analysis on these ancient pots has been a revelation, chemically confirming the use of the very materials described in texts: cedar oil, expensive coniferous resins, and animal fats. These were the practical containers for the sacred oils and unguents used in the anointing ceremony, their very residue a silent testament to the rituals performed. Other clues come from the tombs of the embalmers themselves. In one such burial, a small box was found containing a set of bronze tools, knives, and hooks, along with lumps of raw resin and natron salt. This was a personal kit, perhaps belonging to a master priest, buried with him to carry his essential trade into the next life. It is from these scattered clues, the drain tables, the stained pottery, and the personal kits that we build our understanding. We are not reading from a manual, but reconstructing a sacred science from the echoes of its practice, from the physical fingerprints of a ritual that aimed to conquer time itself. Even the most sacred rituals were not immune to human fallibility. Archaeologists have occasionally unsealed a coffin expecting a single occupant, only to discover a perplexing jumble of bones. These were not acts of disrespect, but often desperate measures taken by grieving families. If a body was lost at sea, destroyed in a fire, or simply too decomposed to be properly mummified, priests might gather the bones of another, unrelated individual and wrap them together as a single composite mummy. This provided a physical vessel for the lost person's car, a symbolic body where a real one could not be found. In other chilling cases, mummies have been found with limbs hastily tied on with crude rope, or with limbs that clearly do not match the rest of the body. These were not ancient attempts at Frankenstein-like experiments, but rather the work of panicked embalmers trying to reassemble a body that had been damaged or scavenged by animals before it reached the workshop. They were creating a functional whole from broken parts, ensuring the spirit would have a complete form for the afterlife, no matter how roughly it was assembled. Some mummies even show clear evidence of post-mortem injuries, deep cuts that were inflicted long after death. These wounds tell a darker story, one of ancient tomb robbers. Looters would sometimes violently smash the mummy's chest to rip out precious amulets, or even break bones to get at jewelry hidden within the wrappings. The most startling departure from tradition, however, comes from the Roman period in Egypt. In a fascinating fusion of cultures, the classic portrait mask was sometimes replaced by a hyper-realistic painting on a wooden panel. These Fayum portraits, named for the region where they were first found, are breathtakingly lifelike. They depict the deceased not as an idealized god, but as a real person with unique facial features, fashionable hairstyles, and even subtle expressions. A young woman might be shown with delicate gold earrings and intricate braids, while a stern-looking man wears a Roman-style toga. These portraits were placed directly over the face of the mummy, sandwiching the individual between their own recognizable likeness and the sacred spells of the wrappings beneath. This practice reveals a profound shift in belief, a desire to be remembered not just as a resurrected Osiris, but as the unique individual one was in life, a final, personal statement meant to last for all eternity. The sacred wrappings were never meant to be undone, a final barrier protecting the eternal form. For centuries, to learn what lay beneath meant its deliberate destruction, an unthinkable act that would erase the very thing we sought to understand. But a scientific revolution has changed everything, granting us a kind of magical sight that allows us to see through linen, flesh, and even bone without touching a single thread. The key to this modern oracle is the computed tomography scan, or CT scanner. This technology takes thousands of incredibly detailed X-ray images, slicing the mummy into virtual cross-sections thinner than a human hair. A powerful computer then assembles these slices into a perfect three-dimensional model that can be rotated, taken apart, and explored from every possible angle. It is as if we have been given the ability to digitally unwrap the dead, revealing their secrets while honoring the integrity of their sacred vessel. What have these invisible explorations uncovered? They have revealed treasures hidden for millennia, not in a chest but woven deep within the bandages themselves. Scans of royal mummies have shown us gleaming gold amulets placed by priestly hands over the wrists, the fingers, and the heart, their protective spells still silently echoing within the resin-soaked linen. We can now map the exact placement of every sacred object, understanding the intricate spiritual armor designed for the soul's journey. But these scans reveal far more than just hidden artifacts. They show us the stark reality of the person who lived and died. High-resolution CT imagery can pinpoint the cause of death with startling clarity. We have seen the unhealed fracture in a pharaoh's skull, the lethal infection in a young prince's leg, and the devastating injuries from a chariot accident. Perhaps one of the most surprising discoveries comes from looking at the arteries of these ancient individuals. When scientists digitally reconstructed the vascular system of Pharaoh Merentu, they found something shockingly modern. His arteries were clogged with calcified plaque. He suffered from atherosclerosis, a condition we often associate with our own sedentary lifestyles and modern diets. This same disease has been found in the scans of many other mummies, telling us that heart disease is not a modern affliction, but a very human one spanning across the millennia. Yet, even a CT scan has its limits. It can show us the structure of the body, but it cannot tell us the story written in the cells themselves. For that, we turn to an even more intimate technology, the science of ancient DNA. Extracting genetic material from a mummy is a monumental challenge, as DNA degrades over thousands of years in even the best conditions. But when successful, it opens a personal diary of the past. DNA analysis has finally allowed us to confirm long-debated family lines. By comparing the genetic fingerprints of the royal mummies from the Valley of the Kings, researchers have been able to reconstruct a definitive family tree. We now know with genetic certainty that Tutankhamun was the son of the heretic pharaoh Akhenaten, and that his parents were brother and sister, a common practice in royal lineages that may have contributed to the young king's numerous health problems. This genetic evidence has solved historical mysteries, confirmed relationships, and even identified previously unknown mummies by linking them to their royal relatives. These are not just anonymous bodies anymore, they are individuals with a confirmed history, a family, and a genetic legacy. The silent, still forms in their coffins are now speaking to us, not with words but through the language of science, revealing the intimate truths of their lives, their deaths, and their humanity. This reverence for the eternal form would be shockingly violated centuries later in the drawing rooms of Victorian England. A bizarre and morbid craze swept through high society, the public unwrapping of an ancient Egyptian mummy. Wealthy hosts would acquire a mummy, often through the burgeoning and poorly regulated antiquities trade, and send out invitations for a grand social event. Guests would gather in a parlor surrounded by fine china and elegant furniture to watch as a respected doctor or an enthusiastic amateur Egyptologist would methodically peel away the sacred linen bandages. This was not done for science but for spectacle. The brittle, resin-blackened body inside was treated as a curiosity, a source of macabre entertainment. The cracking of ancient bones and the unearthing of amulets were met with applause and fascination, a complete inversion of the sacred rituals that had created the mummy in the first place. For the Victorians, it was a display of power and progress, a way to touch a mysterious past. For the ancient Egyptians, it would have been the ultimate desecration, a destruction of the very vessel built to ensure eternal life. From this atmosphere of disrespect and sensationalism, another potent legend was born, the mummy's curse. While stories of curses had always lingered on the fringes of archaeology, they exploded into global consciousness with the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922. The world was captivated by Howard Carter's discovery of the nearly intact burial, but the mood shifted when the project's financial backer, Lord Carnarvon, died just a few months later. The circumstances seemed ripped from a horror novel. He succumbed to blood poisoning from a seemingly insignificant mosquito bite that became infected. At the exact moment of his death back in London, the lights in Cairo reportedly flickered and went out. Even more eerily, his beloved dog back at his English estate was said to have howled and dropped dead at that same instant. Newspapers, hungry for a sensational story, seized upon these coincidences. They printed wild claims that a curse was inscribed on the tomb's entrance, promising swift death to all who disturbed the pharaoh's rest. In reality, no such inscription was ever found by Carter or his team. The so-called curse was a modern invention, fueled by a potent mix of media hype, public fascination with the occult, and a deep-seated, perhaps subconscious, guilt over the colonial plunder of ancient cultures. The truth about the subsequent deaths is far less supernatural. Howard Carter himself, the man who actually breached the tomb and should have been the curse's primary target, lived for another 17 years, dying of natural causes at the age of 64. Most of the other individuals present at the opening lived long and healthy lives. The legend, however, proved more powerful than the facts. It tapped into an ancient fear, a warning that some realms are not meant for the living, and that violating a tomb carries a price, even if that price is only paid in the currency of our own imaginations. From a corpse lying on a stone slab to a perfected eternal being, the transformation was nothing short of a miracle. This 70-day journey was a masterful fusion of three powerful forces working in perfect harmony. Deep religious faith provided the ultimate purpose, the desperate need to create a vessel that could survive the final judgment and escape oblivion. Sophisticated science delivered the method with a startling understanding of human anatomy and the chemical genius of using natron salt to defy decay. And intricate artistry completed the work, restoring the body's form with padding and paint, then wrapping it in a protective shell woven with active magic and sacred amulets. Every step, from the careful removal of organs to the final opening of the mouth ceremony, was a deliberate act in a grand cosmic plan. The entire practice stands as a breathtaking testament to the ancient Egyptians' deepest desire, a refusal to accept that death was the end. They built for eternity, investing immense resources and ingenuity into a single, profound hope that the essence of who they were could live forever. It was a universal longing made tangible through ritual, science, and art, a powerful echo of a hope we all share. After this journey through the secrets of mummification, which part of this incredible process captivated you the most? Was it the spiritual reasoning behind preserving the heart, the startling practicality of using desert salts, or the intricate magic woven into the linen wrappings? Share the secret that fascinated you most in the comments below.